Many of you know the name Eric Ramsey from his time at Auburn, but I had a chance and have gotten the opportunity to really learn about Eric Ramsey, the person, the kid that was from Alabama who grew up to be a great football player and is now the filmmaker, director, producer, and actor. I want to share Eric's story with you. So take a listen, subscribe, and be on the lookout for more unique stories and journeys of people in unique spaces.
That
Uh,
was crazy.
Man, it's awesome to be able to that we finally been able to work this out. I've just been fascinated the more I've been able to learn about you and your total journey, even looking at the impact that you've had on college athletics now. And so, in as we look to where you are with the filmmaking, the producing, the writing, the directing. I mean, everybody uses Tyler Perry as the standard, but I think you're also creating your own lane because you're telling your stories from your voice of
Right.
your experiences. And so I want to jump into all of that. So let's kind of start from the beginning. I want to talk about what was kind of paint a picture of what it was like growing up in Homewood, Alabama.
Well, in order to talk about Homewood, you have to talk about the two other places that I was also associated with, and that's Cooper Green Projects uh,
Okay.
in Birmingham, and then uh, um, um, Cooper Green, and then Homewood, and Homewood and Rosedale is pretty much the same thing. But I started out in Cooper Green Project with my mother, who was a single mom with 9 kids, six boys and 2 girls, and I was in the middle of all 9 of those. And I had a sister and 3 brothers older, and a sister and 3 brothers younger. So it started back then, and then just to try to relieve myself of some of the hardships of growing up in the projects. My grandmother, who I still worship to this day, she took on the role where my father, who was absent, he was in and out of the system, in jail and, on drugs and stuff like that. So my grandmother, she became like my mom. And I
Yeah.
went to live with her and throughout my childhood and on into junior high and high school.
Now, you brought up something very interesting. So, the early part of my life, I grew up in the projects in North Carolina, a small town called Laurinburg.
Hmm.
And a lot of people don't know or they assume what that environment is like when you're living in the projects. And I always say that rural poverty and rural projects are a little bit different than when you're in a larger city in, say, the
Yeah,
Northeast or on the West Coast.
yeah.
How would you describe growing up in that environment?
Well, I look at it like I mean, you're definitely it's a huge difference, and because when they say country, then you like, okay, but when they say country, when they say country, that person probably was sharing shoes with his sibling, clothes and stuff like that.
Yeah, you've killed your food before.
Right, exactly. So I was more, it was more city country for me, and growing up in the projects in Birmingham and Cooper Green, where like in the rural area, everybody looked out for each other, but the same thing happened in the city country, but you just had more people to deal with. Like, say if you got in trouble, where I was from, especially if you did it at school, by the time you got home, you may have gotten a whipping by 5 or 6 people, and they may not even be your mama. so, so,
Exactly.
so you had to deal with that type of stuff, and but everybody looked out for you. One thing I can say about the project is that even though it had its bad, you still had the good people,
Yeah.
that looked out for you and that wanted to see you succeed. Like even when I went to live with my grandmother, and I started having success in athletics and everything, people from the projects would they still would come and to my games and stuff like that.
So, how did you get into sports?
Mm. Well, it started off in the projects in Cooper Green. I used to watch, believe it or not, I used to watch O.J. Simpson.
Okay,
and,
okay.
and, and everybody used to call me the Juice, no, after O.J.
Okay.
Simpson. So I had a little talent, could move and fake people and juke people out and everything. But it was nothing was never organized, So I played. In the streets, whereas my brother Randy would he taught me who actually taught me how to play football. He wouldn't let me go in the house until like he would throw like bombs at me, and then one time I almost got hit ran over by a bus, but he wouldn't let me go in until I caught the pass, and it was like nightfall and everything. But and that just gave you a determination to know that you possibly can succeed at this. And then once I moved on to the junior high, when I went to live with my grandmother in Rosedale, Homewood area, I ended up just well. It's funny. I had two best friends, Ed Thornton and Don Skipper. Don Skipper, my best friend, but and we had another buddy, may he rest in peace, named Randy Greer.
Hmm.
And the four of us used to always hang together. But Don and Ed were the superstars, and I was actually smaller than them in the eighth grade. And then all of a sudden, I took it just like a growth spurt came on, and the next thing you know, I was 6 feet one, and they were still 5'8", 5'9", and then everything took off from there.
So, what was high school football like in Alabama during that era? Because so many people outside of the South, I don't think they understand how much of the Southern culture that high
Right.
school football is really tied and intertwined together. Kind of paint a picture for the audience of what that was like playing high school football in Alabama.
If you the best way I can explain that is if you ever seen the movie Friday Night Lights.
Yes,
It's
yes.
more along those lines where everybody comes out during that day. You have a big pep rally at the school during the day, and then the town, the city, everybody get prepared for the game. And it could, then depending on your rival, whoever the rival is, you could have thousands and thousands of people at the game, and everybody just enjoying themselves. There's good, eating and food and everything. But the competition is so it's crazy, man. People like your cousins can be on the opposite team. And you like, like
Yes,
what's going on? But
yes.
everybody knew each other on each team, and like when I ended up going to school at Auburn, a lot of my teammates or people that I played with and at the rival schools, they ended up at the same university that I was at.
Now, you brought up Auburn, and I want to talk about, get you to share what was the recruiting process like then? Because now, you have rating agencies. You can go online and see a high school player where they're ranked and what star they may have. Back then, you had what, maybe one or two publications. So, what was your recruiting process
Well,
like?
I think my recruiting process, I don't know how it was. It seemed to me like I didn't get the ideal situation as far as recruiting was concerned. I remember my junior year, my high school coach telling Auburn that I was going to go to school there, and I pretty much agreed with him. But and that was more so because I was a big Alabama fan growing up, but Alabama didn't recruit me. They actually recruited a buddy of mine named Lamont Russell at the same position, and they didn't recruit me. And so when that didn't happen, I just I decided that if they say I was going to Auburn, that's where I was going, and I took that. I only took one visit, and it was to Auburn, and then I didn't. Florida State, Tennessee, and several other schools recruited me, but I had already committed to Auburn, based on my coach, telling them. And then even when I met Coach Dye, Auburn's coach back then, he said you can hit people, you can catch. He said, you Sam son, you can do about everything. He said, if I give you a scholarship, he said, if I give you a scholarship, would you take it? I said, yes, sir. And that was mainly based on the fact that I had promised my grandmother before she died that I was going to get a college degree, and this was the perfect opportunity to do so.
And oftentimes people assume they know the influence of a athlete's journey and purpose. And that's why I'm glad that you talked about the influence of your grandmother and that promise that you made, and also the relationship and trust that you have with your coach, that he could say something about an Auburn and then it's a done deal because of that trust.
Right.
How would you describe your influence? You talked about your grandmother wanting to promise that degree, but why that? What was important about that versus saying, "Hey, I'm going because I want to go to the NFL and make a bunch of money." What was it about that promise?
Because I felt like no one in my family had done it, and none of her kids that I knew of. And I knew my uncle went to school, but not on, he went to Miles College, and not no offense against Miles College in Birmingham, but not on that scale. And I wanted to take over for my what my dad wasn't doing. I wanted to be that beacon of hope in her life and to make her proud. But it just became my mission to make my grandmother proud. Because she had taken on that responsibility to raise me. With little means, but she made it work. And I knew that. I knew her struggle. I knew she had, she was working and cleaning white folks' houses and all the stuff that she had gone through. So at the least I could do would be to get a college degree, and but by getting a football scholarship, that was the only way that I knew I could make that happen.
So you decided the decision was made for you to go to Auburn. Let's say
Yeah,
you reinforced it. You show up on campus.
yeah.
What was Auburn's culture like when you showed up on campus?
When I showed up on campus, it was well, it was totally different from the recruiting. It was like, wow, you went from being that superstar guy in high school to being like, who is this piece of crap? That's what it seemed like because you got to remember this is a school that had Bo Jackson and everybody
Yeah.
like that, and Frank Thomas, and well, Frank was came in the same year that I came in, but this Auburn was highly successful in having some great athletes at the time, and
Hmm.
so I felt like a young piece of meat, and that it wasn't the same as recruiting. Even the coach that recruited me, he it seemed like he was an asshole from, from the time when he was trying to get me to sign. But I got it. I understood, what was happening, and but and I guess we'll get into other things that happen, based on what I become known for. But yeah, it was much different. It was how they say a rude awakening. It was a rude awakening.
And that seems to be a common theme from my experience to other student athletes and various experiences, is that once you're there, that rude awakening. And I want to jump ahead a little bit and talk about something current, and we'll go back. But when you talk about you get there and that rude awakening, and I think about the transfer portal now for student athletes, do
Hmm.
you think that rude awakening in different programs leads to a lot of kids making the decision to transfer?
Yes, because even back then, the thought of transferring, you wasn't gonna go.
Yeah.
Like I remember thinking about it, and then but I remember having a teammate who wanted to go and play for the University of Miami. When he tried to transfer, that didn't happen. He ended up actually flunking out, and well, whatever happened to make him decide that he wasn't going to play football anymore. So I think he was given a ultimatum or option: either you stay at Auburn or you don't play anywhere else. And so with the transfer portal, it's just transfer portal, NIL, and all that stuff has just made it easier, for athletes in order to
Mm-hmm.
you actually you create they are able to create their own reality based on everything that they're allowed to do now, which we didn't have that opportunity.
Yeah, so you talked about showing up to Auburn and getting that reality check that you're not at the top of the line anymore.
No.
How did you adjust to that on the field as well as in the classroom, and then socially, that environment that you're thrown into when you are this essentially a young kid thrown into this environment of what many consider not just the racial but even the economic difference, the
Right.
lifestyle
Right.
that some of the students
Mhm.
had that you didn't have. How did you make that adjustment?
Well, the good thing about the adjustment part is that I grew up I grew up in an area, predominantly white area called Homewood, Rosedale. And, I was
Mm-hmm.
used to being around, used to being around white people. But the adjustment had to be made when I realized that, yeah, I'm around white people and I'm used to certain things that may be said, but I'm not used to it coming from people that's supposed to be my teammates or anything like that. So I had to adjust to not only things being said or done in a certain way, but I had to mentally focus and try to just, stick to that promise that I had initially made to my grandma, that I, regardless of whatever said and done, that I'm still gonna, get that degree, and which, I got it, but just based on, earlier when we was talking, we mentioned racism and everything. I got the degree at the detriment of being called being booed at and called nigger. So,
What was that like the first time you heard it on in that environment?
well, it was different, but I was, like I said, I was used to it. I remember even in the fourth grade, I was when I first went to all white school. The little kid ran up to me and he said, "You just a nigga, 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 nigga." And so when he said
Wow.
that, I knew I was in enemy territory.
Yeah.
And so, let's say I beat him up and put him in a trash can. But
I was going to say, 'cause
yeah.
he didn't just say it one time, like he rolled several in there.
Nigga, 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 nigga. It just came
Yeah,
out.
you asking for it at that point.
Yeah. So yeah, and then let's say he never said it again, but that I was used to. But to hear it, and then feel like, that there's some tension going on here, and that, like even in the summertime, like when the jobs were, being offered, you can't play, but you can go out and do this job, where you're working, out in the sun. But then you feel like, well, that your white counterpart is not doing that kind of job, and
Mm-hmm.
but that came along the line of the socioeconomic gap between blacks and white, growing up in the projects, or growing up, whites had, they had it, based on their family dynamic, and basically we just had to just, do whatever we need to do in order to to make ends meet. So they knew that they were going to get a corporate job or some kind of job that was, benefit them, where they don't have to, sweat. But, we was used to, I guess, being out in the field. So that's the job that we pretty much got a lot of the times.
Now, that's a great segue into the essay. Talk about the essay and what made you decide to take what you are not only observing, but you're living through firsthand that experience. You're noticing the racism, you're seeing it in front of you. What made you decide to put it in an essay?
Well, the reason I put it in an essay is that a professor gave me the opportunity to voice my opinion in writing. And but what I did know that is that he had an ulterior motive, because he was said he wasn't going to get tenure, and so he used me as a way to get back at the university for not giving him tenure. White guy, he contacted a reporter who was married to a black woman that was doing a story on racism. So he gave the reporter my paper that I had written about what I felt was disparaging treatment at Auburn. So he used that as a means to get back at them, but at the same time, my frustration on whatever was going on that I wrote that I spoke about in the paper. He was able to once something happened, something else happened. I was I felt like I was left no other choice but to talk about or let them print the story about whatever I was experiencing as far as racism was concerned.
Now, I want to know if you felt this. So, oftentimes student athletes are unfortunately seen as adults, and the older I get, the more I realize we were really highly functioning kids.
Right.
And when you think about the essay, the motive of the professor, the motive of the reporter to get more attention for him or herself and putting it out, the adults that are involved in the university and their brand, it seems, did you now, when you look back on it, look at the situation as adults taking advantage of a kid for
Mm-hmm.
themselves?
Right. That's and that's like when it's funny you say that, Ken, because that's like when someone say well, Eric Ramsey, he was making the tapes. He was trying to get back at the school. Why did he take money and everything? They tried to put the onus on me instead of putting on the university, who knew the rules and should have combated or whatever they thought I was doing, but they was part of it, and they was complicit with everything that was going on. But they tried to make. But even to this day, when I was listening to someone speaking, they were still trying to blame me. And I'm just a kid. If somebody gonna offer you money, at that time I got married when I was in school, 18, 19. I had a wife and a kid. And my thing was, but you're asking me to play football 24/7, 7 days a week. And I got a wife and kid. How am I gonna earn an income? And then if you did give me any kind of money as far as a Pell Grant or anything like that, the university took half of it. So
Yeah.
it's like I'm damned if I do, damned if I don't. But you want me to say, okay, I shouldn't do nothing. I shouldn't ask for anything, but you should get everything, all the money. You should, but you're giving me a scholarship, you know, and that's
Yeah.
that's what hypocrisy come in at.
And so when you talk about that, the essay comes out, and I want to hear, if you don't mind sharing your perspective. Was the what was the driving force from the results of the essay being out that made you take a step further and say, you know what, I'm gonna tell it all? Or was it
well,
more
it,
in between?
well, it was when I cause see what people don't what they forget also is that I spoke out during the time I got drafted. Most that was the the dumb part if you want to say on my part, because I should have waited till I was established in the NFL or anything like that before all this stuff happened. But it was more about the fact that I wanted to prove that I wasn't lying, and even to this day, I'm still. People feel like I'm one of the most honest and open people that they know, but because I don't wear my. If there's an issue, we're gonna talk about it. If
Yeah.
we're gonna get it out in the open, regardless of whatever it is. I'm not gonna hide stuff or try to keep quiet just because somebody tells me. If I feel something, I'm gonna say it. I'm gonna talk about it. I'm gonna do it. And so that's where it was just once they said I was lying, you're not gonna call me a liar. And so
Yeah.
I had the tapes to prove that I wasn't lying. So by having those tapes as my backup, there's nothing they couldn't call me a liar anymore. Even though they tried, even though they spent over
Yeah.
$1 million to authenticate the tapes don't lie, as they say.
And so that's what that's leads to the next question. When you talk about they were calling you a liar again, you're talking, you're married, you have a child, but age wise, you're still a kid.
I was 19.
So how did it feel to now you see all of these people now coming against you. They're calling a liar where a couple of years earlier they were begging to have you come and entertaining you on a visit, and now they're coming after you for merely expressing what was the truth.
Yeah, but I always say, the same people that was cheering for the one booing me and calling me niggas now. But you got to remember, that's why they call it fanatics. It's that
Yeah.
gladiator mentality, fans, people they crazy about. Everybody looked at me as the enemy because they felt like I was destroying something that they had come so accustomed to seeing all the time. So
Yeah.
I became public enemy number one because I was going to take away what their very existence they felt.
So the truth didn't matter.
No,
Again, it's almost as if you were a disposable kid that they could go get another one
that's
any
right. Well,
day.
that's the whole part of the way. That's why I call it a slave plantation system. Back when I spoke before Congress, and I said I call college football the 100-yard line because it's set up. It's a meat market, and who next man up. You know,
Yeah, that
who
is
can?
literally what a coach would tell you.
Yeah,
That that
exactly.
was that
Exactly.
was one of my eye openers. Was true freshman year. You coming in, camp is the worst experience ever.
Yeah.
And I remember a guy. It was an older upperclassman had an injury, and they blew the whistle, said move it up 10 yards and keep practicing.
Mm-hmm.
You don't even
Yeah.
wait for him to take him off the field. You just move it
No,
up
sir.
10 yards.
No,
And
sir.
so that's a real eye opener that you are
Yeah.
very disposable.
Disposable. Yeah. Very disposable. And I I think I just became you when going back to the question you asked me about the what made me like tell the story and just go ahead and talk about the tapes. That was also part of it because I just felt like player after player kept giving me these sob stories or sad tales about how they were treated and all the stuff that was happening to them. I just felt like now is the time to do it, regardless of whatever it's gonna do to me. I got to do this, and I was warned. I was warned. I'm not gonna mention his name, but I was warned by a good friend of mine to this day, teammate that said, he said, Ramsey, listen to me. You know, if you do this, your life is gonna change forever. And I said, I don't care. I just want the story to be, the truth to come out.
Well, I can understand that team dynamic and wanting to do and protect and help your teammates. And so you're hearing all of these other stories. So it wasn't something you were just doing for Eric Ramsey. You
Right.
heard the pain and the issues that really had become a part of the Auburn culture.
Yes.
So with gathering all of that and looking out for your teammates, but yet being getting that warning, do you really feel like you got your just due from your teammates for what you've endured and the sacrifices you've made trying
Oh,
to
oh,
protect
hell,
them?
hell. I'm gonna give you. I don't even curse, but I'm gonna say a big hell no. Only thing I can say that today is that because I proved everybody wrong that I wasn't lying about the tapes. I can say that people who was afraid to talk to me or had issues with me based on being brainwashed or feeling like that I was the enemy because that's what they were doing. They was making them think that I was the bad guy, which I talked about abortions. I talked about different things that was happening because people asking me. I'm like, wow, what the hell I would know about getting an
Yeah.
abortion because that was a thing they said the coach allowed to happen because they didn't want all these pregnant women running around here. But a lot of the stuff that uh, I got I got ostracized for, you know, and I felt like when I was being booed and called nigga, I felt like the black folks was in the crowd cheering and doing the same thing. But the funny thing was that I was at peace with that. I wasn't upset or angry because I knew that you got Judases and everybody in all camps and races
Yeah.
and everything. So I was
Yeah.
like clapping them and egging them on because but at the end of the day, the reason that I didn't wasn't so hurt or distraught over that because the promise that I made to my grandmother when I was a kid, I was fulfilling it. So no matter what they said or did, it didn't bother me.
So, who in this time when everyone is attacking your character, they are attacking your integrity, and many of them were people you probably thought that were going to be in your corner.
Right.
Who, if you don't mind sharing, were the people that stepped out and had your back?
Are you joking right now, Kevin?
No,
I can honestly say, other than my attorney and my ex-wife at the time and her parents, mm, nobody I can think of. Oh, one my cousin, may he rest in peace. My cousin, Vincent Harris, he did speak out and say what was going on, but he was about the only one. And again, I didn't need them. So I didn't ask nobody to stand up or speak the truth because I didn't need them because I had the tapes to prove everything that I was saying. So it wasn't even an issue where I was even upset with them or mad with them because I knew what they were going to do. I knew that
hmm
nobody was going to stand with me. Because sometimes in this life you just have to be out there on your own. You're on an island, man, and
yeah.
so you just have to do sometimes all by yourself.
Where did that courage come from?
I think it was instilled in me, like I said, from my grandmother, man. I mean, people always like, "You still talking about your grandmother?" Y'all just don't know. My grandmother was my life, and so she instilled some values in me that have stuck with me and still, with me. All these, my grandmother been dead since 1985, and that's not a day that I don't think about. I think about my mom too, because she passed in '94, but that's not a day. I'm sorry, 90 something. But anyway, that's not a day that I don't think about my grandmother, man, and the impact that she had on my life.
So, if you could give a timeline, because I really want to get into you being the first student athlete to testify before Congress about that, really just addressing the question of should student athletes get paid and
Right.
sharing your experience. Kind of give a timeline of just the year of the essay, the tapes, and then when you were testifying before Congress.
Well, in 1991, 1990, the end of my last year at Auburn, I right before I got drafted in at that April or whatever that was, when draft was February. I had written the term paper, and then but I went on to Kansas City after I got drafted by them, and well, what happened was I heard that there was a lot of letters and calls from Auburn saying that I was a whistleblower. Don't put me on their team. And as a matter of fact, uh, when um, when I got cut from Kansas City, I was shocked that I got cut because most of the time I had seen people get cut. They call them early in the morning and
Yeah.
5 o'clock, 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning to say, we're releasing you. So it was like 10 o'clock in the morning, and I get a call from I think remember the guy name was I think Denny Thune, and he
hmm
calls me, and I go in to talk to Marty, and he was like, uh, when you can play in the NFL because when you hit people they go backwards, and then he was like, well, we're gonna put you on the practice squad, and then so it went from we're gonna put you on the practice squad to no, you're cut, and but it didn't have anything to do with Auburn. I'm like, well, who said anything about that? And so I'm thinking, well, still they're going to put me on the practice squad, but it never materialized. And then I would go. Here I am, bench pressing 400 pounds, running a 4.40, could hit, could jump out of the building, but nobody would give me an opportunity to play. And I knew what the deal was. I even had former Auburn coaches that was coaching in the NFL. They was like a scout, and they looked at me like they didn't even know me. Black coach, he looked at me like he had never seen me before in his life. And
Wow.
yeah, so I knew then, but then after that, that same reporter who did the initial story on
Uh-huh.
me from the Montgomery Advertiser, he
hmm
came back and said, you see everything that's happening. They still talking about you. Do you want to tell the rest of the story? And then I'll be honest with you. My feelings were hurt by by what was taking place, and I said, okay, yeah. And what they didn't realize is that the rest of the story was that I had 3, 4 years of work of tape conversation of coaches and alumni paying me either perform on the field, saying the N word and everything else. So uh,
Wow.
I I put it out there, and then next thing I know, I got a call from Congress. No, I got a call from Ed Bradley, the team at 60 Minutes. So I ended up, being on 60 Minutes, and once I did the 60 Minutes interview, that's when Congresswoman Curtis Collins of Chicago, she was doing some on intercollegiate something back then in 93 or 94. And that's when she invited me to come testify before Congress, 1994.
So 1994, you're testifying before Congress, and
Right,
they are for the first time even entertaining the question of should student athletes get paid.
right. And
Fast
then,
forward to 2024, 2025, you're seeing what it is now.
okay, so let me say this. Let me say this, Kevin. When I testified before Congress and they asked me about them getting paid, I said that since football is the most lucrative sport that we have as far as on a collegiate level. So I said that the players should get paid $100,000 a year for the 4 or 5 years they're there. Even if they go pro, it's still their money, and you still give them $1,000 stipend. You can hear the rumblings in the audience when I said that. So I'm like, well, that's not gonna happen. But that was my initial response to players getting paid. I felt like that $100,000, since we were at that time, Auburn generated on football alone $18 million back in 1990, 92, 93.
And
So
that was before. So Auburn, you guys are probably on 4 or 5 times a year, but on television. So that was before the huge $1 billion TV
exactly,
contracts got added to it.
exactly.
And when you talk about the framework you had laid out for playing student athletes, and that number, when you look at what it is now, that was actual pay for play. So, with my experience working in athletics, what I saw is that there's a distinction between NIL pay for play and the portal is separate. But that pay for play is where you're going to see universities going now after the recent settlement for the House versus NCAA case. I think that cited that right. But that very figure that you mentioned, that 100,000, that's sort of a baseline figure that you're seeing payers get paid from the universities because NIL. Let's be honest, NIL collectives was just another way of saying pay for play. Because I'm not
Yeah,
seeing players in more commercials than normal.
right. And the difference is that, like, it was just it's more like a quote unquote legal way to
Yeah,
create the have and the have nots, because like and when they was giving it away to the players under the table, mostly the players who were superstars or the better athletes, they were the one who was getting paid. NIL is the same thing,
yeah,
but you're just
yeah,
recognizing it, as a legal entity. But now that it has, that pretty much the NCAA as it exists is no longer. When you
yeah. Oh yeah,
once they put it in the hands of the
yeah,
university, then that changed the whole dynamic as far as the NCAA is concerned. I mean, it's already becoming a figurehead anyway. Now it has totally lost all control, and and they won't be going back to that. And the players should be deemed as well, that's the quote unquote real semi pro, because
yeah.
they're not on a professional level, but they are getting paid. So they're no longer they're not only just on scholarship, they're on payroll.
Yeah, and I think that's going to change the nature of how the scholarships are written and laid out.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah,
I want to jump into something that, as I've talked to professional athletes, student athletes that may not play at that level. For a lot, that transition after the game can be very difficult. When you factor in what you were going through, how you were treated by the university, alumni, and really the general public for standing up for the truth, how difficult was that transition for you away from the game to now trying to be this professional, but yet you're carrying this extra weight?
Yeah. Well, if you look at it, Kevin, if you look at it from a friends and family point of view, they shocked and they were like, dude, how did you do it? How did you do that? How did you survive? But my thing was that I think I was talking to someone earlier about just having that inner peace um, from a
Mm,
kid, from even like I talked about, being molested as a child, and and everything that go along. I've always had this inner peace that God is always going to take care of me, no matter what happens, no matter what the outcome. I've always felt like God has had my back. Now, don't get me wrong, the times was tough and it was trying. Nobody would give me a job. I had people when I moved from DC. I mean, moved from Alabama to Maryland, and nobody would give me a job. And they would just bring me in for interviews just to see who is this dude, this nigga that
yeah,
causing all
yeah,
these problems and did all this stuff. And they would recognize me, and then they would but they know they weren't going to give me a job. It wasn't until I was, I'm so bored by things, and I was at a bachelor party, and I met this guy named Theo Kramer, and he said, aren't you Eric Ramsey? And I was like, yeah, that's me. He said, what are you doing now? I said, well, dude, I'm looking for a job. And
yeah.
he said, you know what? I can get you a job on the PG County Board of Education as a teacher. And I met as we talked the next week. He followed up, and then next thing I know, I was teaching at Potomac High School in Oxon Hill, Maryland, as a special education teacher. And
Wow.
that started everything. They got the ball rolling, and that just the confidence that I already felt that was going to happen, it just increased it.
So how and continue to share your journey. How do you go from being special education teacher in PG County to writer, producer, director, actor, roles in hit television shows? How did that transition happen?
Well, it it went from um, I always like I, as a kid growing up and even as an adult, everybody always said I was good looking, and I had
Oh, here we go. Here we go. I knew it was. I tried to stay away from the model conversation. This is
yeah.
what I should just turn up. I should just use the audio.
So back then, I when I moved to Maryland, I went to an audition because somebody else, you got that model look for years. People had said that. And so I was, I always was like really fit and had the chisel face and everything. And so one day I went for a model audition, and the guy said, "We booking you for $200 an hour." I said, "How much?" He said, $200 an hour. Okay, I know what that model look is then. And so I started doing that, but that was, it was in Maryland, and then I moved to New York for like 2 months. I couldn't get in a New York state of mind. So I said, I'm gonna I'm gonna move to California. So I moved to California, and when I got here, uh, I realized everybody was a model. Everybody got the model look. Everybody. So
Yeah.
I said to myself, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna start making my own movies and then putting my friends in my movies who wasn't getting booked for certain jobs. So I started making movies. Started with a buddy of mine named Apollos Lorient, Haitian guy.
Hmm.
And we did a first film called The Promise. It was about my grandmother and the promise that I made to her I would get my college degree. And so it went from there. So I went from that one movie to making short films to making features. And then in the midst of all of that, in order to pay for them, I was doing security. And then as I was doing security, uh, there came a need for, especially after COVID or during COVID, there came a need for more security and because of situations and people,
Mm-hmm.
doing certain things. And that I started Ramsey Security. It was Ramsey Security LLC, excuse me, which became Ramsey Security and Management. So I had it co-mingling with making the movies and owning a security company. At the same time, meeting the final wife, which I have at present, and we, becoming, we feel like, a little power couple where we're trying to, change people's lives, and we used to quote that we we hire people, or something I used to say is a little saying, because I always felt like, it was incumbent upon me to look out for people and take care of people, whether or not they be in the industry, homeless, or whatever.
Well, you can look out for me. I don't mind being black dude at the bar stool number 3.
Gotcha. So I'm gonna put you in the next horror movie. You won't get you won't
See, wait a
you
minute, wait a
won't.
minute now. See, you ain't saying nothing about a horror movie now.
Well, that's my next project.
Okay, talk about if as much as you can. So you've made a lot of different films, and
Yeah,
that's one of the things I've enjoyed as I've had a chance to go back and look at your background in filmmaking and playing the different roles. Uh, how did you what gave you the courage to explore? Again, you're talking about a horror film, but then you look at your first film was Promise. Sharing the story of the
yeah,
relationship and the promise you made to your
yeah,
grandmother.
yeah. And I've done faith based. I've done
Yeah.
films where about molestation, and and the crazy thing is, Kevin, is that I taught myself how to write, produce, and direct. I've never been taking any formal classes or anything. I just, I know that a story needs a beginning, a middle, and an end. And so, and if you give the characters just a little depth, then you can, and if you got really good actors, then you can make something happen. And so, basically, I just, I took it upon myself just to do that and allow, friends again who wasn't like some of my look at the people that I gave roles. They're on some major networks and everything now. But I'm not trying to take credit for it or anything like that. I was just glad I was able to, give them the opportunity to showcase their talent.
I hear that a lot in hip hop, movie making, filmmaking, and other industries as in terms of the attitude of people from the South, genuinely wanting to help others be successful. Do you think that's a part of the culture that we grow up in?
That's definitely a part of the culture, because you have to remember, we have to when they say, am I my brother's keeper? Yes, we are. We have to
Yeah.
look out for each other, because it's a different mindset. First and foremost, if you legitimate South, you're dealing with racism, you're dealing with social economic
Yeah.
injustice, you're dealing with so many negative things. So if you're not helping and trying to strengthen and help the other person grow, then you're not doing your job as a true Southerner.
Yeah.
You know,
So I want to ask, uh, uh, do you still have the original tapes and the original essay?
I have the original congressional hearing speech. Only
Wow.
I don't have access to the tapes anymore, because I think I lost them when we were traveling from Alabama to Maryland. I think they got, whatever the way I tied up the stuff on the secondary vehicle we were using. I think a lot of that stuff fell off, and so
Oh.
yeah, yeah. And then, to add insult to injury, they made this guy rest in peace. I shared that years ago with a guy from Birmingham who was writing a book with me. He somehow, the tapes got stolen or something from him, and other stuff that I had, like where my mother, sent me, wrote in my yearbook, that I was the one who made her proud and stuff like that. So a lot of memorabilia and a few things that was very, that was touching to me. I lost it just based on, either just you know, mishaps and just different things happening. And the only part of the tapes that are still available is what aired on 60 Minutes.
What was that like to get that call from Ed Bradley?
Well, it was exciting in the sense that it was Ed Bradley, and the fact that that he was going to do the story on it. He was the nicest guy, but he told me that he said I have to play devil's advocate now. So I don't want to stump you or anything, but I have to say I can't be on your make it look like I'm on your side, even though I am pretty much. And he, I mean, it was a great time and in New York. And then and we had a good mentor at the time. My who I'm really good friends with till this day, Donald Watkins, and so he kept everything on board, and then he didn't allow through none of the things that over the years for nobody to take advantage of me. You know.
When you think about that timeline that you shared being at Auburn, what you went through, you talk about that early 90s time period. And, when I think about the landscape of that age group and what was going on in college athletics, it was almost like a rebellious spirit. If you look at Michigan and the Fab Five and how they were portrayed in the media, when you
Yeah.
look at UNLV and how they were portrayed in the media, and I think about what they were up against, and it was very similar to what you were up against, which
Yeah.
was, who are you in this privileged position? One, have a voice, and two, think that it's going to be louder than the adults in the room, even though your voice was the truth.
Yes. Well, you got to, it almost came, well, I think they did everything but say it, like,
Okay.
nigga, who do you think you are? I think that's but um, you knew, I knew that I could get away with it. That's the only, like I said, saving grace is that I knew I would be able to get away with the paper that I wrote because I had the tapes to back it,
Okay.
you know.
Okay. So when you look back over your life at this point, where you are with, and I want to get back in it. Well, before you do that, I want to get into this horror film. Let's go ahead and get that out of the way. I'm not a fan of horrors, but we did go see Sinners,
Dennis is amazing.
and so I want to hear about this project you have coming up.
Okay, so the project that I'm doing when I get an opportunity to get to it is called The Haunted Hospital, and it's loosely based on another movie that I did called um, I can't think of the name of it, but similar to where about Bryce Hospital in
Yeah.
Tuscaloosa, Alabama, where they were doing lobotomies on black people, trying to find a cure for quote unquote white mental illness by doing lobotomies on black people. But so in that movie, I made it where the black people or black prisoner was getting kidnapped in order to perform those lobotomies, and so the horror is going to be an extended version of it. But whereas the black people won't be getting killed, it'll be the white people getting killed, just based on the horrors that they did prior to that.
Well, I don't know. I might can take that one. Yeah, I might need to get a role in that. You changed up the normal flow of things, so I might could,
Yeah,
I might
yeah,
I might can swing that.
yeah.
When you look back on everything from growing up in the projects to the impact of your grandmother on your life, playing sports, Auburn, testifying before Congress, now being this director, producer, filmmaker, uh, what do you want your legacy to be?
Mm. Well, basically, believe it or not, even though I talked about the modeling and all the other stuff, I'm pretty simple. I'm a pretty simple guy. I don't drink, I don't smoke, I don't hang out. I spend quality time with my wife. And the biggest thing I want people to know of what my legacy to be is that I didn't have a problem with anybody, and I always tried to tell the truth in
Yeah,
spite of, in spite of.
yeah. So if you had to, last question, if you as yourself now, knowing what you know, seeing the outcomes that you're seeing, and you have a chance to sit down with young Eric right before you made the decision to release the tape, what would you say to him?
I would have asked him the same question I told you my friend asked me. That if you do this, what's that your life's going to totally change, and are you still willing to do it? And the answer to that is a astounding yes.
Yeah. That's awesome. Again, when I had a chance to sit back and look at your story and look at the journey that you've had and where you are now, a lot of those things would have and continue to break a lot of people along the way with what you've
I've heard
gone
that.
through.
I've heard that.
Well, I mean, you talk about your grandmother, but what is it? It's got to be something deeper than that.
Well, it's the probably too, with knowing that you don't know when your next meal coming from. You got, again, my brother Randy was, man, he's still my biggest fan to this day, and I'm like, bruh, I'm not even doing this stuff anymore. He was like, nah. And I think the village part of it, because you hear those stories about when they say that nobody people watch out for you and make sure, everybody looked out for me. Nobody wanted to make sure that I was
Yeah.
going to get involved, which I wasn't. But my daddy was enough for me. But whenever that looked like I was going to get in trouble, they was like, "No, boy, go home, get away from here. You don't want to be." Even as a grown man and moving off and to Maryland, I had a friend, and I keep trying to tell him we should do a parallel documentary on each other, about each other. Whereas we were friends, we're still friends, and he chose the life of drugs or whatever he did. But even though I was right there around him, for a few years, he never made me a part of it. He said he did that on purpose,
Mm.
and that could have been divine intervention. That could have been a lot of things, but I just never was that person who believed that. I didn't believe in peer pressure. I didn't believe in, not telling the truth. I didn't believe in, like I said, I got in trouble, but the trouble that I got in was usually involved trying to, get in some young lady's pants or something like that. So,
That's universal.
right.
Universal at that
So,
age.
but it wasn't getting in trouble. It wasn't stealing. It wasn't taking
Yeah.
advantage of anybody. It wasn't
Yeah.
beating people, robbing people. I just never had that mentality, whereas I'm a harm someone. I feel bad. Look, I feel bad when my son was 2 years old and I spanked him on the hand. So,
Yeah.
it's just I just always tried to live by the straight and narrow, and if you pick on me, now that's one thing I need to say. If you pick on me, just as nice as I am, I'm just as bad on the other side of being nice. So that may be one
See,
thing
I
that I
can
got.
believe that. See, what people don't understand is when you play defense, you got a switch that'll go off.
Yeah,
Now, it may take a lot, but especially when you're known. So, to the audience, when you're known as a hitting corner,
yeah,
that means you have zero fear
yeah, yeah,
of coming up, knowing you're getting ready. And chances are, unless it's a receiver, chances are that is going to be a bigger running back.
yeah. So
And
you peep, you
so,
peep, you peep that I could hit.
well, I mean, you said it, and I did go back and do my homework now. I did my homework. And
Yeah,
again, at that time, you don't come out of the South at a program like Auburn and with that success and be the player that you were during that time and that not be a part of it. Like that
yeah,
the game back then was not 4 or 5 wide receivers, run pass option. No, somebody was coming to hit you in the mouth
yeah, yeah. And I was
every play.
and the crazy thing, Kevin, is I was an all-state receiver coming out. I played defense, but I was an all-state receiver. But some I think what happened was as in an LSU game, I went down on a kickoff and I hit this guy. He was actually a track star named Slip Watkins. I hit him so hard and it fueled whatever was in me, that I didn't care how big you were, that if I made contact with you, you was going down. You're not knocking me over. You're not running. And that's why I was so shocked that nobody gave me a shot.
Yeah.
Nobody. That's
But
why I
you
knew
knew
I was
what it was.
blackballed.
So
Yeah,
you
but
almost got so you got Shador Sanders before Shador Sanders.
I got two things. That's funny you say that. I got Shador because Auburn didn't do anything in order to help me get recruited to the NFL.
Yeah.
The guys that they had at the same position, they didn't get drafted. I got drafted, even though I didn't get any kind of publicity. I didn't go into publicity. I didn't go into any of the bowl games. I didn't go to. I barely got to the combine, and then
Wow.
but I still got drafted. And then I say I call myself. That's funny you say Shador, but I'll say I was Kaepernick before Kaepernick.
Okay, I can see that now. I see that being a better better analogy and comparison. I can see the Kaepernick piece, but see the you again, but the time and where the country was at the time that you did it, and adding the context of where we're talking about Auburn, Alabama,
Yeah, yeah,
and again what football means to the culture, and you shared it. You're talking about fanatics, and there are fanatics everywhere of a multitude of things.
but not like Southern fanatics.
That's what I was going to say. And again, you're a kid. You're not a
Yeah,
full grown, 40, 50-year-old man doing this. You're essentially a kid trying to still figure it out in this environment that is
yes,
one pressure field to perform,
yeah.
and then you still trying to figure out just life in general. So
With the wife,
that's
with
what
the wife and kid.
that's it. That within itself, that within itself, okay,
Yeah,
that's a
yeah,
whole podcast episode with itself. So
right.
that's what I'm saying. You're dealing with all of this, but essentially, you're still a young man, a kid trying to figure it out, and that's what fascinates me is looking at where you are now and the journey that you've gone on to this point where you're not just in entertainment, you're guiding the ship, you're writing, you're directing, you're producing. And I just think that that is a testament to, in my opinion, the way you was raised, the people that
Yeah,
were around you,
yeah. And a lot of
and who
people,
you are as a person.
a lot of people. I think people marvel at the fact that I'm so happy go lucky and I'm not bitter. You know, and I think that's what the thing is, that I'm not bitter, and that you don't see me trying to feel sorry for myself or feel what I'm never a oh woe is me person. So
Yeah.
I think that's what people marvel at, because I've never been like that, even as a kid. Uh, Again, if you come after me, I'm going to come back swinging, but I'm never one to come at you and disrespect you on purpose. When you do something to me, it's usually a response to the very fact that you did something to me.
And that's why I wanted you. That's why I'm glad you shared the timeline of what happened, because I wanted the audience to see again, you were going along doing your thing. And when the adults got involved for their various reasons and motives, it put you almost in a corner, basically.
Yeah, yeah. They backed me
And
up to a corner for sure.
and that's what I want, people to really see is that it wasn't just here's this kid looking for an opportunity to think that I'm going to take him down. No, you backed someone in a corner as an adult, the one that should have been putting your arms around this kid, helping him figure things out. You're putting him in the corner because you see him as disposable. And it just makes me wonder how many other student athletes were lost based on the ulterior motive of the adults that was supposed to be
Yeah,
putting the interests
yeah,
of the kids first.
yeah. And also to add to that, a lot of them, just think how many people that didn't have the backing or that I had,
Yeah.
and what they probably faced, and still you wonder, like, what happened to that person? Haven't I ever seen them again? Like several people who was in that position, that spoke about all the different things that was happening even while I was there. I've never seen those people again. So I don't know what happened to them. You know what I mean?
Wow.
I just know I remember them saying what they had and what they were going to do, and I remember them, disappearing. Now,
Wow.
disappearing where or to what happened, I don't know. I'm not
And
saying,
see, disappearing in the South can mean a lot of different things.
you know.
So uh, with that, you talked about not having any bitterness. Do you think you would? Do you go back to campus?
I haven't been to campus yet, but I've cheered for Auburn since day one because what I understood is that was an Eric Ramsey issue at the time. It wasn't an issue where that involved that I felt I needed to ostracize or have a ill will towards my teammates or anything. I was just sharing my what happened to me. It was my experience. So, but I was still, I still have always been an Auburn fan because Auburn was the school that recruited me. Auburn was the school that my child was born, at and everything. So, I don't have any bitterness or ill will towards them. But when you say that I'm lying, then you have to suffer the consequences of what you say I'm lying about. We're
Yeah.
gonna see who the real lie is, and then not me.
Wow. Well, Eric, I appreciate you sharing your story, and it's been an honor and a privilege to have learned more about you, and that's why I wanted to make sure that it's really about the truth, and to see that your life is bigger than that time and what happened in Auburn. You've gone on to do so many inspiring things, and I just wanted to make sure that there was a well, first of all, I appreciate you allowing me the opportunity. Because
No
again, you've
worries.
been on. I'll admit it was a little intimidating because you had been on 60 Minutes as a youngster.
Right, right.
So now I'm just like, okay, I just hope I can ask some decent questions. So,
No, you were
uh,
actually great. You were great.
but
Great
I do
question.
appreciate this, and because it's not always easy being vulnerable, and I know sometimes looking back, unless you do the work as a person to really accept your life for what it is, and you just keep seem to be making the most out of everything that you've been given,
Yeah.
and I just think that's awesome. And again, I appreciate it, and I got to have you back because we got to talk some college football, a lot of other
Yes,
things
sir.
going on.
Look,
Uh,
look. I appreciate you taking the opportunity to look me up.